Okay, let's just adjust this really quick.
Right.
All right. All right, and you are live. There are people tuning in now. Ready when you are.
Good evening. Welcome to our Q&A session regarding our implementation of digital learning at RMA. I'm Kathy Moore. I'm the Dean of Academics here at Riverside, and I am here to answer your questions this evening. Some people did submit questions in advance, so we are going to start with those questions. And Zach will be reading those questions so that everybody will have the opportunity to hear those, and then I will respond to those. And then we'll let folks just jump in and ask questions online as well.
Yeah, so if you just repeat the question when I read it to you, ma'am?
Yes.
That would be great. Okay. And if you would also tell them they can add their questions into the chat feature as well.
Yes, please feel free to add questions into the chat feature here in this session. Please don't send anything to me by email or don't send anything to the form because I can't see that right now, but I will be glad to take your questions.
First question is, how will you manage computer issues?
Okay, so I thought we would start tonight with a question that is one that I know folks might worry about, and that is, how will we handle computer issues? So we will have technical support available to us for any problems that arise. We are going to be sending out information to your sons this week so that they can make sure they've got technology lined up as much as possible before we start on Monday morning.
Great. The next question is, how do I access the RMA portal?
If you go to riversidemilitary.com, on the right-hand side of the screen, upper side as you're looking at it, you should see a button for My RMA. If you click on that, then it will take you through the login process.
Third question is, wouldn't shorter classes each day be easier for the cadets to focus? 90-minute classes seem quite long and would require tremendous independent learning.
Okay, so let's talk about what the daily schedule is going to look like. The way we have devised a schedule, and you should have received a couple of emails, your cadets should have received an email about what our schedule is going to look like. So let me explain that schedule to you. We have devised a schedule where the class periods are 90 minutes. Now that's different, of course, from what we've been following this year. Our normal class periods are 50 minutes. Here's the logic behind that. I want there to be that where your son is with his teacher for each class period. There will be some direct instruction time where the teacher is working with the cadets in the room, and then there will be part of that 90-minute class period where cadets are working on assignments, maybe they're working on a small group project, it could be that they're taking a quiz or a test. But because we will have our digital platform, which is going to be Zoom, because that room will be open, your son's going to be able to access his teacher throughout that 90-minute period. So, if you will, it's sort of like OT because of the fact that any questions that your son has can be asked directly at that point in time. Is that 90-minute period the only time that you can ask a question? Absolutely not the only time. The teachers will be accessible when it's not class time in the normal ways that cadets reach out to them using email. But that gives us the opportunity, while we've got them there, to know if they have questions. And I'm going to go ahead and skip a little bit around. Right now what we're trying to do is address questions in the order that they came in today. For those cadets who live more than 4 hours later than us time-wise, earlier than us time-wise, we will have recordings of everything. And for all the cadets, any cadet could go back and look at sessions. But we wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity for our cadets that are on the other side of the world to be able to access all of their digital learning as well. Teachers will know exactly who those cadets are going to be. They'll be working individually with them to make sure that they can accomplish everything. Next question.
All right, so if my son had a PE class, how is that going to be done during digital learning?
Okay, so, the core subjects, that probably makes the most sense to everybody. You can kind of think about what English and history and math and science would look like in a digital environment, but what about the other parts of our cadet schedules? We have fine arts, we have other electives, we have PE, we have military science. So all of those courses will be continued in this digital learning environment. Your cadets' credits will not be interrupted at all that way, and things will look a little bit different. So with the band, obviously part of what the band did was they did performance. We're not really going to be able to do band performance online, but Chief Giovi and Mr. Rossi, they're on top of that. They've got a plan for what that's going to look like. They'll be delving into some band theory. They'll be watching different things online. They'll be having conversations about music. So I think you're going to find that even though digital learning is not going to look identical to how a face-to-face class would be, there's going to be rich content there. Also, for the PE classes, there will be an expectation that cadets are actually engaging in physical movement. Our coaches are on top of how to track that and deal with that, and so they'll be taking care of that component as well.
Will teachers be available to help outside of the instruction hours?
So, will teachers be available to help outside of instruction hours? Absolutely, they will. So you'll have this extra time in that 90-minute class period, but then additionally, cadets can reach out. They can send messages. They can reach out in all the normal ways that they would, except for they can't go see their teachers face to face. But yes, very much the teachers want to have that connection. And really, I should stop and say that we're grateful that we have a cadre of cadets on campus with us still. I will say that we miss having all of our cadets here with us. The energy's not the same. There's a big difference having 400 and something guys on this campus, and we miss them. And the teachers are very excited about getting to see them live next week or interact with them by email or within a Zoom chat so that they can get to see them. But very much their presence is missed.
If cadets have questions, how can they reach out to their teacher?
Okay, so for this week, I think most of the teachers are going to be sending emails to cadets. That's probably the best way for this week to reach out, for cadets to reach out to their teachers. Next week, when they're in their classes, they're going to have that 90-minute period twice a week to be, in the Zoom environment with their teachers, and then they can use emails just the way they have in the past.
All right, so the next few are accountability questions. So I'll just sort of give you the keywords of the questions to answer those. So how will teachers know that the cadets have done their work?
Okay, so let's talk about accountability. Because, after all, the reality is that for many of you, that's why you chose RMA. We're serious about making sure that our cadets are accountable for where they are, when they're supposed to be there. So what does that look like in this new digital world? That is part of the reason that we're using, for all of the cadets possible, this live version of digital learning. We want them to check in. For those of you that might not be familiar with Zoom, when people enter the meeting space, our classroom if you will, their faces begin to appear, and I would say that it's like the Hollywood Squares or the Brady Bunch where you see people in little squares on the screen. Here's the great thing about that. Our teachers can see them. They can see what they're doing. That's going to come in handy when we want to do the one form of assessments where, and this is used in many other schools where they have a situation where a cadet's taking a test at their desk, hands have to be on the desk, and the cadet or the students are asked to tilt their camera a little bit so that it can be seen. But generally speaking, check-in. Check-in is an important part at the beginning of every class period. Having that cadet there live. Now, they're going to realize that they can mute themselves or they can blank their screen, but we will require that their screen be live and we will mute them when we don't need for them to talk. But generally speaking, we want to have that interactive time at the beginning of each class so that we can know that they're out there and they're working. It's the best way for us to simulate the environment that we have here. When we were here face to face, they had to go to class. If you didn't go to class, an email got sent, and trust me, we went to look for the missing cadet to figure out where he might be. In this case, obviously, we can't come to your house or your town and look for your cadet, but we can let you know if your cadet is not participating in class the way he needs to be. You will be getting those communications so that you can assist on your end, because we know that for many of you, you've got professional responsibilities or you've got other kids that are at home also doing school at home at this time.
Okay. Can we talk a little bit about the demerit system?
Absolutely. So what happens to demerits? Probably much to your son's surprise, demerits are going to still exist. If they are not accountable for showing up when they're supposed to, if conduct in class is not appropriate, if just other situations where we would have normally given demerits can be issued as well. So again, trying to maintain that structure that we've always had at RMA, we're just implementing it differently.
Are parents still able to access grades?
Oh, grades, that's a great question. Absolutely. We will still be using the grade book that's in my RMA. So you're going to be able to go click on your son's information. You'll go look at my progress just like you've always been able to do, and you'll be able to see the status of the grades. I want to let you know we're not going to do grades in the upcoming week. We want to give everybody a chance to get accustomed to this new environment. We are going to do accountability. We want to make sure they're where they're supposed to be, but this also simulates the way normal grades would be at the beginning of the quarter. We don't usually do grades in the first week or two because it's the very beginning of the semester, haven't had as many opportunities to capture grades, so we're just continuing with that same type of environment.
Could you just remind them, the messaging this morning was Google Meet, so can we just clarify what we're using?
Absolutely. When I sent out the notice that I sent to parents last night, I indicated that we would be in Google Meet. We had been debating, to be honest with you, between Zoom and Google Meet. We had thought perhaps that Google Meet would be a bit easier for everybody because that was an application that was already in our Google Suite. We tested it this morning with the faculty, so putting a number of people in a classroom at one time. We found that the quality was not where we wanted it to be, and also Zoom offers us some features that Google Meet did not. With Zoom, we can see everybody at the same time. With Google Meet, we could not see everybody in the class at the same time. We like the fact that we can see when your son is in the classroom. So we made a change this morning to that, and I believe that Colonel Corbin sent out an updated parent email indicating that we were using Zoom. So that will be the platform for being in class, and we will be sending, your teachers are going to be sending out information to the students. We're going to make it very, very easy. The link to join the Zoom class is going to always be the same. I mean, the way they access the class will always be the same. It won't change from week to week. For those of you who might have used Zoom in a professional situation, and there's always a unique meeting ID, we will not be using that. We're going to try to keep this as simple as we can for the cadets.
What do the syllabi look like for each class? Are we changing the way that assignments are weighted?
All right, there's a question about weighting of assignments. So we are still going to have class participation. We're still going to have assignments. We're still going to have quizzes and tests, and we're still using the grade book. Some of our teachers, most of them actually, they are making changes to the syllabi to reflect the change in the meeting times. Now, just as you've been able to do in the past, you're going to be able to go in and look at the schedule. Currently it would show you what are the classes for Tuesday, what are the classes for Wednesday, what are the classes for Thursday. That feature will still be there. We were able to have a software modification done to our master schedule so that the schedule is reflected currently in my RMA exactly as your cadet will be experiencing it each week.
For students that are 6 hours ahead, I know you talked about that earlier, but could you just clarify what resources are available for students that are outside of the time zone that we can support live conferencing?
Okay, so the question is about what are the resources that we'll be using with cadets that are outside of the time zone band of the ones that we're expecting to be there live. So we're going to have a variety of things loaded in the Google Classroom. Every single course will have a Google Classroom. So for every course on your cadet schedule, there will be a Google Classroom to reflect that. In each of those classes, you will see a variety of things that are loaded in. There will be recorded lectures, perhaps. There will be activities. There will be discussion questions. And while it will be difficult, perhaps, for a cadet that is 12 hours off cycle of where we are, cadets will be able to message back and forth with faculty. If we have a cadet that's really struggling with something, we will attempt our very best to make arrangements to create an opportunity for a live Zoom session just with that cadet and the teacher. We will try very hard to resolve everything without having to do that so that we can not disrupt the flow of the cadet schedule.
What's your advice to parents to set up a conducive environment for studying at night or during the day?
Okay, so the question is about environment. Here's my advice. You need a routine for home. They're delighted to be at home. I'm sure that all of them are enjoying sleeping a little bit later than they were here on campus, unless you've already set up a schedule that's having them get up. But make sure, if you're not already, set a schedule where they're getting up same time every day. We're not making any requirements on them for how they have to dress, but make them get in the habit. I mean, this is all just part of the getting your head inside of being at school. Make them get dressed. Have them do their breakfast. Go through all the routines. Figure out where school is going to happen for them and make it consistent. So If it's in their bedroom, then it's in their bedroom. If it's in another room in your house, but try to create that consistent pattern so that for them, they'll know what to expect. For the cadets that are here on campus, their afternoons after class gets out is GSA. You know, that's our time when we do sports activities. And so I encourage you, for the cadets that are at home, let's make sure that, weather permitting, that they are getting outside as well. They need to. They need the fresh air. They need to get some of that energy out of them. And then with the evenings, if they may get a lot of their work done during their class sessions, but if they've got some work left to do, make sure there's some dedicated time at night for studying and completing work. And then let's just make sure we've got them on a routine to where they're going to sleep so they can get up the next day ready to learn.
Are we allowing cadets to study together using a video conferencing tool?
So the question is, can cadets study together using a video conferencing tool? This is one place where, you know, Google Meet might work well for cadets that wanted to have a place for just the two of them to work together. But yeah, they can study together if they want to. I mean, you know, obviously we do mean study and not, you know, not doing anything inappropriate like sharing answers on something that they've been told they shouldn't be, but we want to encourage that opportunity for them. Also, so that you will know, you know, of course with our technology, we have, you know, always attempted to have a lot of good control over what cadets have access to. We've made sure that Google Meets and also the Zoom platform are unblocked, so they should be able to access those from their Chromebooks without any problems.
Okay, so we've reached the end of the pre-submitted questions.
Okay, so we're at the end of pre-submitted questions, so we're now going to be looking at what folks have submitted via the chat for this session. So let's find out what we've got.
Give us just a minute as we kind of sift through and see which questions have already been answered.
I was just gonna,
Oh.
let me out, so I do want to address the fact that, you know, we're living in such an interesting and different sort of time. And I know for some students, not just RMA kids, but just kids around this country that suddenly have found themselves with a break in school, it gets really tempting to think, well, it's not really important anymore. I don't really have to do that. You know, I don't have to do the schoolwork. Here's what I would encourage you to stress to your son. We have one whole quarter left to finish. It's a fourth of their grade. It's half of their second semester grade. It gets averaged with the third quarter. So if they blow off fourth quarter, that is not going to be a pretty situation when you're trying to average grades with third quarter. Particularly if a cadet wasn't in a super strong place going into fourth quarter. We want our cadets to finish strong and to complete the grade level for which they are enrolled. So if you could try to help reinforce for them the importance of that and the fact that this quarter does matter. I think they're, you know, I've heard talks from my friends that their kids are like, it won't matter, it won't matter, they won't use those grades, but we're really serious about that. We've built an environment where we can complete school, and so we do intend to complete school with our fourth quarter grades. So please help us with that. The teachers will be reminding cadets of that in a kind and supportive way, not in a punitive way, but let's all work together to make sure they understand that while we're living through this really unusual part of time, that we're going to try to do this normal thing called school.
Could you talk about what OT is going to look like? I mean, we talked about today how each teacher would have their room and cadets would be able to hop in. So what does that look like for cadets that need extra help?
All right, so the question is about OT. What does OT look like in a world where we are not here together? First of all, OT will maintain the same structure of the fact that a teacher can request a student to be an OT, and they are going to coordinate with one another across cadet schedules to make sure that, we don't have multiple people requesting a cadet for OT at the same time. But a cadet can also voluntarily, just like they can right now, if they were here, they'd walk into a teacher's classroom. Since we're online, they'll walk into their Zoom classroom. Teachers will have that session open so that cadets can pop in there and say, hey, can I get help with this? So that part of OT will transfer to our new digital world and function, we hope, in a very, very similar way.
What do assessments look like now that they're at home and not supervised by a teacher?
Okay, so the question is about assessments, and that is a great question. And, it is going to be different. Assessments will look different because we understand that for part of these cadets, they will be doing this independently. There's not going to be someone able to stand over their heads. Luckily, there are lots of innovations that have come about with how you do assessment online. I want to tell you a little bit about something that we have built for the teachers. We built our own Google Classroom for the teachers. It's our training ground where we've been collecting resources, where we have training materials, videos, documents that teachers can use. We have a resource document in our Google Classroom for Teachers that has information on how to do assessments in an online environment. There are different tools that teachers can use, and then also part of what it shifts to, you can still, with the Google Classroom, we can deploy an assessment that has a timed situation around it. And we can make sure that accommodates also our learners who are in different parts of the world, so that will be taken care of. But the way you go about building assessments just looks a little bit different from the way we've done it in the past. You give timed assessments, just like you would have been in the regular classroom, but they're completing them online. I mentioned at the beginning, but for those of you who have jumped in, using Zoom allows us to look at a cadet's workspace and their body when they're sitting there. So one of the things that we might do for certain types of assessments would be to say, you can't take your hands off your desk. We have to be, I don't think y'all can actually see my hands necessarily, but they're behind the desk part. But you have to be able to see the hands. That's one form of doing that. Another form of assessment where it becomes not as easy to cheat is when we move to a type of assessment where we are looking at application of knowledge rather than basically more of memorization of knowledge. It gets harder to use other people's work, if you will, when we're asking for application of knowledge. We do have support tools for our teachers for that, so that's what it'll be looking like. It'll be different, and I would hypothesize to you that in many ways I think these assessments will be a bit richer in the fact that we're going to be asking cadets to then take knowledge and apply. And to be honest, probably many of the teachers have done essay questions of the sort that really were getting at application. But that's where we will be with assessment, so that we can still get an authentic picture of student learning.
Could you talk a little bit about AP exams? Are they still on as regularly scheduled, or?
At this moment, they are on. We are not certain of what the status of AP exams will end up being when we get to May. So here's how we're dealing with that. We are moving ahead as though AP exams will occur exactly as scheduled. We want to make sure that our cadets are prepared and ready to sit for those assessments when the time gets here. If the If there's a decision that there's a delay, then we will of course react to that and respond accordingly. That's one that's a little bit out of our control since we don't make that decision, but we are moving forward as if we will be doing those assessments. Next.
How do parents contact teachers?
Parents can reach out to teachers via email. A parent could request to have a private Zoom session with the teacher as well, just as a parent might request to either have a phone call or a visit in person. And since the visit in person isn't possible, then either a Zoom session if you want to be able to see someone face to face, or a phone call. Also, that prompts me to think about the fact that I have not mentioned, I don't think very much about our counselors. They are also building class sites, Google class sites for counseling, and they will be having sessions with our cadets for just individual needs. And then Ed Benson, who I know that our parents with seniors are quite aware of, Mr. Benson will be continuing to make sure that everything is tracking appropriately with your son's plans for college. And then in several weeks, we will begin preparing schedules for fall. We'll be gathering information from all of our teachers regarding what they are seeing as the appropriate placement for all of our cadets except for the ones that are graduating. And then we'll be generating schedules so that you'll be able to see early on what plans are for fall 2020 for your cadets' academic life.
So normally in our daily schedule, we have military science that offsets with a study hall period. Are we still offering something like that, or what does that look like?
We will, actually. They will have a study hall period that the military science and study hall share a class period, and we will still have that study hall time for cadets. And, you know, and honestly, it's quite possible that for many of their classes that between their study hall and their extended class time with each class session, that they'll be able to get much of their work done during the day. And while I'm thinking about it, for our cadets who are enrolled in the MAC, they will continue to have study hall time as well, and they will be tracking the MAC kids during OT as well. So they'll be standing up a Google Classroom and they'll use Zoom for MAC study hall as well.
There are some questions that I can just answer here, and if you could just verify that they're correct.
Sure.
But every teacher will have a Google Classroom, and that is the environment that cadets will log into daily to check all of their assignments. Whatever was happening before in their classes, now is Google Classroom is the standard practice.
Yes, Google Classroom will be our standard practice for where all classroom materials are housed, and cadets will need to check in every day to make sure that they're tracking the courses that they're in and the assignments that they're supposed to be doing.
And in those Google Classrooms, the instructions for logging into each teacher's specific Zoom meeting room will be inside their Google Classroom. Yes,
the question was, just in case you didn't hear it, will the directions for logging into Zoom be housed in the Google Classroom? Yes, it will.
Somebody asked for a frequently asked questions or a written form of this live session. We will provide that at a later time.
Absolutely. We will do a frequently asked questions for academics for you.
Talking specifically about hands-on courses like our fine arts, I know you mentioned earlier with the band, but we have classes like PE and driver's ed. Should they just look to their teachers for guidance first?
Yes, please look to teachers for guidance on those classes. All classes will continue, but they're going to look and feel a little bit different. But we're looking for resources. We're finding an amazing array of resources to help support our fine arts classes. And then, as I said earlier, for PE, there's going to be an expectation that they are doing physical engagement, and there will be assessments done from that.
There was a question about dress code. I know you brushed on it earlier with an
Mhm.
answer to one of those questions, but what are the cadets expected to wear when they sign in?
We have not made any rules per se about cadet attire for when they check into classes. You know, let's just be sensible, and, you know, and for me, part of getting them in their daily routine means they don't go to school in their pajamas. So, you know, let's just have them dressed appropriately for the daytime, and, you know, so that's a little bit of a break for the cadets that are at home.
In the daily schedule that was sent out, you have OT twice a week, but then you have these dashed lines. They almost look like free periods. What are those periods used for? And are cadets expected to be online for those periods?
On Monday, Wednesday, Friday, where there's not an OT designation in the early morning, school just doesn't start until a little bit later. The reason we're starting the principal part of our day at 9:30 is we are trying to make sure we're accommodating of folks that live in different time zones that are close enough to do live, but a little bit away. So if there's not a designated item in the block, then they do not have a responsibility.
So does this continuation of online study, does this meet the standard enrollment requirements for each state?
Yes, we will have more than enough, both number of days in the year plus contact hours that are necessary for accreditation. We're not going to do anything to jeopardize accreditation. They will be having a rich experience that meets the time that we should be interacting with them. I think all of the accrediting bodies, you know, around the U.S. right now are recognizing that this digital learning, it's a new way of being. And so much has been done to look at the quality of interactions, what's being done. You know, the likelihood is your cadet's going to have interaction directly with his instructors outside of that designated class time. But we are hitting 3 hours of class time even without that, which is a pretty rich and nice connection with them. And it's a little bit different because there are schools definitely that are much more of an independent study model where your cadet, your son, would wake up, log in, take a look at what the work is for the day, figure out what they want to do when, and then do it. We didn't go with that model for a reason. We didn't go with that model because it doesn't fit the philosophy of what we're trying to do here at RMA. The structure for the cadets is important, and we know the quality will be there, so we feel very assured. And I want to assure y'all that I also have a deep background in working with accreditation. That is something I have done for more years than I'll even care to admit, but accreditation matters to me. Doing things the right way matters to me a lot. We're not going to do this, we're not cutting corners, we're going to do it right.
There are some repeat questions in here, so just for our viewing audience, this will be available later for on-demand viewing. So if you didn't get your question answered live at this very moment, it probably was answered earlier, so just re-watch it in a few minutes after it's available online. Academic restrictions was the next question. What does that look like since cadets are home?
Well, that's a great question. So if a cadet is not passing a course, and we are still going to do weekly grades, then my suggestion would be to restrict some behavior. You're going to know best for what the home world looks like, what would be effective. You know that far better than we do. We know what works here. You'll know what works at home. If they're not passing, you know, they probably need to be doing some additional work. Teachers will work with them to make sure that if they're not passing, the cadet is clear about what he needs to be doing to get that grade up. But I do recommend that we try to have some consistency between us and what's going on at home. Also, I don't think we have mentioned that the tags have not gone away. The tags are still with us, and so in addition to getting communications from teachers, just as you have in the past, please expect to hear from tags. We will be communicating, checking in with people, and they're going to be a vital part of that communication process as we go through the next 9 weeks.
What about final exams?
Final exams. What I would like to say to you at this moment is, I think we will use the assessment formats that I have mentioned previously. I anticipate that the exam schedule might look different from the way it is currently printed in the schedule, but it might not. We might go with a model where we have 2 exams a day over a period of a couple of days. The elective areas have always done their exams during the last week of class, and then the core content areas have done theirs during the exam period with an extra day to deal with any conflicts between exams. So that may be the exact schedule that we still follow, and the way those assessments will look will be utilizing the same kind of strategies that I was talking about earlier with regard to how we would handle quizzes and tests, with the fact that it might not be, let's say for example, a multiple choice test, but might instead involve more application of materials. So probably more in the line of a thought question where they're having to take concepts and then use them.
Give us just a moment as we're sifting through the questions.
We're trying to make sure that everybody's questions get addressed here tonight if we can. So what our team is doing is they're reviewing the questions that are coming through on the chat and trying to make sure that, in the interest of making sure that we get everything answered before we finish our hour, that we've hit on every topic. So they are currently sifting a little bit, looking for making sure that if we've already answered something, we'll skip that for the moment, knowing that somebody can go back and watch the recorded version.
If a cadet has to miss a class, say for a doctor's appointment, what's our policy moving forward?
I think we've dealt with cadets having to have appointments all year. We will continue to deal with that. What I would suggest is that there's communication between parents, for the cadets that are at home, between parents and teachers, so that the teacher is aware of an appointment. We are going to hold to the expectations that our cadets have to go to class, even though that is an online format. So please just keep that accountability piece with us so that we will know when to expect that someone's not going to be online during the live portion of that class.
One of the cadets says they miss being here.
Oh, we really do miss having all of our energy of our cadets, and we're grateful that we have our cadre of cadets that are here, because that's the energy that's keeping us going right now, is getting to see their smiling faces when they're coming and going. Of course, this week they're not having classes, so they're getting to enjoy an array of fun activities during the day, and so I think they're having a good week as well. But we do miss having all of our guys here.
A question was asked about haircuts.
Well, we have not had a discussion about haircuts. I'm going to request that you give me a little bit of time to get an answer to that. We'll address all aspects of grooming with that as well. What haircuts are supposed to look like and shaving and whatnot. So we'll get an answer back on that one within the next couple of days. And whoever asks that gets the prize for thinking of the question that we hadn't thought of yet.
What about the cadets that were scheduled to meet in the MAC with Dr. Adams? Are there special Zoom meetings for those cadets?
Yes, Dr. Adams and Mr. Sedgwick will have a Zoom set up for the cadets that are assigned to the MAC so that they can continue to work with them in that small setting.
So there's a question asked about ENN, and I think I know who asked it, but ENN is, we're working to find a solution for a virtual show where cadets submit segments to our producers to try to put something together. We'll send out more guidance on that as we move forward.
We would all be very happy to have ENN segments continue this spring if they can figure out the technology around that. We miss having our ENN guys on campus capturing everything that's going on in the life of a cadet.
For cadets on campus, is there any, are they being taught in person? What is their academic time looking like?
So for the cadets on campus, they are participating in the same class structure as our cadets that are at home. There are going to be teachers here who are with them on a daily basis, but we're not reteaching their whole classes line. But part of the reason we settled on that is we want them to get to be with their classmates. And so we didn't want to pull them in a situation where they were different, but there will be teachers with them throughout the day as they're having their academic day here on campus. And so they'll be able to access their teachers and ask questions of them in person.
There was a cadet that asked a question about them having a job at home since they're at home now and their parents would like them to get a job. What's our guidance on that?
My guidance would be school comes first, and let's make sure that our cadets are available for school during school hours. And then you know your son best, and if you feel like your son can handle a part-time job that's after school hours, then you are the best judge of how that will work with your cadet. I encourage you, if your cadet's going to have a job that's after school, please make sure you're watching their academic progress to make sure that their grades don't slip any because of the additional responsibility they've taken on.
So we are encouraging families and cadets to send in photos of them working at home. If they could send them to public relations at riversidemilitary.com or tag us on Facebook and Instagram with @RiversideMilitaryAcademy.
Yes, we would love to see pictures of your sons and what they're doing at home. And by the way, we will also be capturing the cadets that are here for school, and we'll also be capturing the teachers as they work in the digital classrooms as well, so that you can see what that looks like on this end of the picture.
Will we still track President's Club?
Absolutely. I don't see any reason for us to waver from that. We're still doing accountability, we're still capturing grades weekly, so we should be able to keep track with President's Club.
So there was one other thing about teachers. Some cadets haven't received their Google Classroom codes yet. Can you tell them we're still working on getting all those codes generated?
Yes, so please understand that we have been working at a feverish pitch, trying to get everything accomplished that needs to be in place for your sons for next week. If the teachers have been going to school, if you will, we have been doing we're practicing social distancing, so teachers have been working here on campus, but they have been in their own classrooms. And so they have, in fact, been going to school using Zoom, setting up their Google Classrooms, but participating in our faculty Google Classroom. So just keep in mind that they all have, 5 or 6 Google Classrooms to set up and prepare. And some of them are learning this new technology at the same time that they're setting everything up. So be patient with us while we get there, but your sons will hear from their teachers before the end of the week so that they can make sure they have everything in place that they'll need to start Monday, ready to go.
So on our live chat, there seems to be a few cadets that are taking advantage of this and maybe being a little funny. So a parent asked, if cadets act like this, like they are on the chat, what are their consequences while they're in a live room with a teacher? Are we going to be removing them and penalizing their grade?
So if we have cadets that act inappropriately in class, we will deal with that conduct the same way that we do when they're in the classroom. We hope that this never happens with a cadet, but on occasion, if a cadet is distracting enough in a classroom and they won't settle down for a teacher, I'm sure your sons can tell you whether or not they've had to go visit the dean's office to have a little chat about settling down in the classroom. So, if I need to, I'll have a Zoom room too, but really what I hope is that we'll be able to maintain most of those issues. The good thing about Zoom is we can mute people. Like the instructor can do that to the rest of the class, and in fact they will do that while they're trying to do direct instruction, just because the simple noise that's in a normal background is a bit distracting for everybody. But if we have someone whose conduct is distracting to the point of needing remediation, we'll deal with that one-on-one. But we will, we'll set the boundaries for these classes and make sure that cadets understand they've got to operate within those boundaries.
Our final question is, will we have a weekly assembly online?
That's a great question. We had already moved away from having a weekly assembly every week to the idea of working in small groups. And so for right now, our small groups are going online, are going to be both the classes that the cadets are in, and then also the small groups that the counselors are setting up for interacting with cadets as well. If ENN can get everything orchestrated to where they can produce segments remotely, then we'll be sending out a link when those segments are ready to go live, and that will be something cadets and all of you will be able to enjoy as well. But I would say that for now, assembly is one of the things that we took out of the schedule in order to try to focus really and truly on making sure we accomplish all the goals with academics.
So I'm putting a comment in here, and if you could just say it as well, that any future question or any questions that might not have been answered, or if they have any more questions, that they can send them to our digital learning email address.
Absolutely. So for those of you who didn't have an opportunity to view this live, and I know there were several of you who had reached out to me to say, hey, I can't be on YouTube right now, but you can send questions to digitallearning@riversidemilitary.com. That email address has been in the communications that came out from my office. The reason we're having you use that email address is it's a central location where we know that everything coming there has to do with academics and digital learning. Thank you everybody for joining us tonight, and we'll look forward to seeing you online.